If he comes up in the middle, it means I'm not doing so well. Okay, so I'll just take some questions. I flew up this morning very early on Delta via Atlanta, and you know the old joke about flying Delta via Atlanta, right? I don't even have to tell the joke, so you can politely laugh. Okay, I'll take any questions. Just raise your hand. And yes, tell me your name.
Jamie.
Hi, Jamie.
Hi. Why are you interested in coming to Huntsville?
Why am I interested in coming
To Huntsville.
Oh, okay. Because I want to go to Mars, and I'm trying to get on the list. And I've been told that if I'm here, I can make friends with people who can get me higher up on that list to be one of the first. No, I was in Georgia for 10 years, and then an opportunity came upon me to be the first rabbi in Jamaica, the island, in 33 years. And I liked jerk chicken, and I had been listening to Bob Marley. So I thought that this was going to be an interesting opportunity, which it was. And then when I left there, it was late in the year, and so it was kind of too late in the year to get a regular rabbi job. And it also happened that I had congregants in Georgia who moved to Jacksonville. And I promised them that when an opportunity came, I would visit them. And the first conference that was there was to train to be an interim minister, rabbi, priest. And so I'd done that. So I'd had the training already. And so I sent out a few resumes to be an interim rabbi. And I ended up in Mobile. I did that for a year, and then a second year, now a third year. So now I'm thinking it's time to find a permanent place of abode. And so then I basically liked Alabama, so I saw, and that's all I really knew about Huntsville. I guess I knew vaguely about the Rockets, but I had no idea what was going on here. And so I sent in a resume, and then Larry contacted me, and that's how we got to where we are.
Thank you.
You were saying earlier that your status as an interim rabbi prevented you or made a difference when you tried to become a permanent rabbi. Could you elaborate on that?
Oh, well, so when you go into a congregation as an interim rabbi, so the interim rabbinate is a fairly new idea, and it's been done, I guess, for quite a while in Christian communities. The idea is that if congregations had a rabbi for a very, very long time, Mobile had a rabbi for 28 years, and or if you've had a very contentious experience with a rabbi who maybe wasn't there as long, but so it could be for those two reasons and maybe others. So if it's a long, long time, it doesn't matter if it was exciting or boring or contentious or not. It's just the fact that it was so long. Or if something actually happened, a scandal, a conflict, then they thought it's better, rather than jumping from one situation into another, to have an interim rabbi for 1 year, maybe 2 years. And the interim rabbi's job is to help the congregation to see where they've been, where they are and where they might go, what their strengths and weaknesses are, their threats and opportunities, and to help them undergo a strategic planning process, which sounds easy, and I've got a whole library of books on it, but it's not, in practice, it's not so easy to get the leadership in a congregation to do this, because it's not necessarily specific work, so a lot of it is about relationships and concepts and desires and beliefs, and it's not necessarily something you can put down in writing that says, we want to increase sales 23%. It's about vision and mission. And so getting people to focus on that and figuring out concrete ways to get that done in a productive manner is much more challenging. So this was my first opportunity to try that, and I'd say that it was mixed. It was some things worked, some things didn't. And now part of it was Mobile wasn't really motivated to engage this process. They looked for a permanent rabbi and they hadn't found one. So then the next thing was interim. So I come in and they liked me. So they said, stay. So I said, I'm not allowed to say that I'm interested in staying. That's not, you're supposed to stay for a short time, do the work, and leave, and then they find a permanent person. And having undergone this process, I now understand why that's so much more. So anyway, I said, I can't say anything, but they said, what if Rabbi, the placement director said, it's okay, would you be interested? I said, well, yeah, I like Alabama. So they went to the placement director and said, no, I don't think it's a good idea. So then they said, can we appeal? So then they appealed. They got a guy who was in the congregation who sells furniture, but he was a Harvard Law graduate. And he wrote a beautiful letter, and then they gave permission. So then I stayed a second year, and this is my third year, and that's where I am in this process. But it's a fascinating process, and one of the things I'm thinking about as a permanent rabbi is what aspects of this process of interim might be useful in a permanent situation. Because the problem is it has to be something that really grabs people. So you can write a mission and vision statement, and then you've all heard this, that it's posted in the office and everybody forgets about it and it's useless. So it has to be done in a way that really touches not only the heads but the hearts of not just the executive committee or the mission and vision task force, but the whole congregation. Does that answer your question?
Very good, thank you.
More. Okay, next. Yes.
How do you view your relationship?
Your name is?
Bob.
Bob.
How do you view your relationship between interfaith couples?
I perform marriages between...
That's not what I meant. I'm sorry, I didn't say it correctly there. In terms of their inclusion in the congregation.
I'm in favor of inclusion.
How, in what way? Obviously, I would hope so. But could you be more specific?
We don't really differentiate, and this comes back to one of Larry's comments about boundaries and borders, but we don't really differentiate under most situations between congregants who are born Jewish or converted to Judaism on one hand, and those who participate but have not converted on the other. And so there are certain issues that arise between, so there's a big difference between somebody who was raised Catholic and has not been to church in many years and practices Judaism from someone who is raising Jewish children, let's say, but is still a practicing Christian. And those people can sometimes be the best Jewish parents, by the way. In Georgia, I had a couple where the wife was Catholic, very devout, and she was raising her children as Jewish, and it worked very well. All three children to this day are very active, very committed Jews. And they could see that the fact that their mother was Catholic and was raising them as Jewish, that didn't seem to be a problem for them. So the fact that she was dedicated to her religion served as a good example to them. So in most cases, we include everyone. Now, there may be certain specific exceptions. I guess the proper Venue for that might be a religious practices committee. So you'd have a religious practices committee, and we bring certain cases like, should somebody who did not convert, I don't know, read the Torah blessings where it says, Asher b'charbanu, who has chosen us as the chosen people. And little things like that. But in general, I would be in favor of inclusion. I think it is, as long as what the person is doing is sincere in their mind, that could be a good thing. But I wouldn't want to, and here it's a delicate thing because as a rabbi, I'm a religious leader. On the other hand, when you're working in a congregational context, you are in a congregational context. So I would want to consult with the religious practice committee, with the board. It would be hopefully a joint decision-making process. Does that partly answer? Do you want to follow up?
You're okay.
I'm okay. You have something specific in mind?
No, it's okay.
Oh, okay, so I can relax?
I would hope so.
Okay. One and then two.
But you would perform a marriage for a non-Jewish couple?
Interfaith couple.
Right.
Yeah, and in Jamaica, there was the opportunity to do the destination weddings, which I loved because, among other things, frequently I got to spend 1 or 2 nights in a resort, including some of the fanciest resorts in the country. So that was very, very nice. I perform weddings where one person is Jewish, where the other person is not. I also would work with Christian clergy, but not perform mixed faith ceremonies. So the Christian would be reading some prayers that were consistent with Judaism, things like that. But you have to be careful because I went to Bogota, Colombia once to do a wedding, and yo hablo español, and they said, well, the bride, they said, we're planning to raise our family as Jewish, and the bride's not practicing Catholicism, but she has a professor who happens to be a priest who wants to talk. No Jesus, no Christianity. I said, fine. And he stuck to that, not a word about Jesus, nothing about Christianity, but he spoke about the bride in Spanish for almost 1 hour. And I'm standing there. I had no idea this was going to happen. I expected 5 or 6 minutes. And as time's going on, and everybody's looking at me like, do something. And I thought, I don't want to provoke an international incident here. So I kept, and it was raining, and I kept thinking, what do I do? What do I do? Do I kick him? Do I just start talking over him? So I just let him. I said, no, he'll stop any moment. And he did. So that was some of the, and it does, there's a whole bunch of funny stories I can tell about that, but that would be my policy. I thought very long and hard about, requirements and, for example, asking the couple to sign a commitment to raise their children as Jewish, and I just felt that asking them to commit to do something for people that aren't even born yet just seemed a little bit presumptuous. And so you just basically take your chances and you hope that it works out. And it's the same thing with marrying people, of whether they're both Jewish or not. You have no idea if this is going to work or not. I offer them the Prepare and Enrich program for premarital counseling. Certainly when I was in Jamaica, most couples were way past that. They happy or not, we're already getting married. We have a date, and we need a rabbi to be there at 5:30 p.m. on such and such a date. Tell them, say yes or no, rabbi. That's all we want to know. And so like with a lot of things in life and with Judaism and being a rabbi, you just do the best you can. Yes.
Yeah, Vic. I'm going to ask a question that everybody will know. There's another member of the congregation who's not here who would probably ask it. What's your concept of politics from the Bema?
Oh,
I didn't hear a grumble from anybody.
Oh, my. Politics from Bema. I've really lived most of my, almost all my career in the South, and in almost all my congregations, there's been a very mixed, 30% to the left, 30% to the right, 40% in the middle. So, as a rabbi, I have freedom of the pulpit, so I have the right to say whatever I think is according to my conscience. But I generally avoid most political issues. People are very sensitive, and when I first got to Mobile, I did casually mention that I thought Ben Carson was not qualified as in foreign policy because when he spoke to AIPAC, he was trying to talk about Hamas, the Palestinian group, and he called them hummus. So I casually and kind of humorously mentioned that I didn't think that was a good sign. And I got, one congregant came to me afterwards very angry, and he said, "You shouldn't talk about politics." I said, "Well, this is just about basic competency. It wasn't the right or left way." And, but he was not placated in the slightest. So I reserve the right to repeat that remark as often as I want, but generally I would, I'm not, of course there's certain things where it's a matter of high conscience. I mean, I think that most reasonable people can agree that allowing people to buy automatic weapons that can shoot 400 bullets a minute, even if you're going to shoot deer, to shoot 400 deer a minute doesn't seem somehow fair. So it would seem that calling for some sort of controls on that is not, in my view, a highly partisan political view. It's just sort of common sense. But in general, I would try to keep my mouth shut.
Yeah, that's not bad. Got one up there. Need a question. Front row, you had a question.
I'm done. I heard what I needed to hear.
Is that a good answer or a bad answer?
I'm staring at a bar mitzvah for this person and a non-Jewish husband. So I wanted to follow up.
Okay, so we want you and your husband to both participate in the bat mitzvah as much as you wanted to, and I can't see any reason that anybody should be limited in things. Yes?
As a parent of a teenager, 13-year-old, how much involvement will you be with Sunday school, with Hebrew and the bat mitzvah classes and confirmation classes?
Well, this depends on what the board and I discuss. So,
were you a rabbi before? How involved were you in your other?
well, I want to be as involved as possible without stepping on too many toes. So, where I am now, for example, I teach 3 bar mitzvah students Hebrew every Sunday morning early before religious school. And then I do different types of services with a guitar player and then a Torah service by myself. And I go around with the principal as much as possible to observe and participate in the different classes. Last year I taught a confirmation class. So I like to be involved, and I think it's important. I think it's part of my job. So I want to be as involved as possible. Do you want to follow that up with something more specific?
Do you teach the confirmation classes?
That's what I did last year. It's everything is subject to what the school wants, what I agree to, but sure, that would be a logical thing. If we can move if the confirmation class is not on the Sunday morning, then I can do other things in British school and teach the confirmation class. So partly depends on the schedule as well. But I like to be involved.
How about services? How do you do family-friendly services that children can be involved so they start enjoying coming to service?
I'm very much in favor of that. I have gotten a little bit of pushback in Mobile that I'm including the kids too much, which I don't think is true. But yeah, I specifically in my essay I talked about this little girl Violet who comes every week. She's the smallest child that comes regularly. And I have in the Yolania where I take out the Torah and have her recite the Shema, and she loves that. With the bar mitzvah candidates, I want them to come to services, hopefully with their family, as regularly as possible, and I give them, some prayers to lead. So, and the purpose is not primarily to get them more fluent at it, although that's true as well. The most important reason is so that they build an emotional connection with the congregation and with the religion. So, because if they make some mistakes, their bar mitzvah, the ceilings don't normally crash in. Yes?
Rabbi Kaplan, thank you for being here. I'm Blaine Ehrlich, my wife is Ehrlich.
Hi. Thanks for participating in Havdalah.
So the political statement about your sermons, I appreciate not divulging too far left or right or anything at all. Excellent. What is your take on, what is your approach to a spirituality type sermon? Where do you sit in that regard? I find that some rabbis take it as they try to project their own practices at home onto us without any spiritual connection as to why. What is your typical take on that?
That's a hard question.
Yeah, I know. It's just a broad general.
But I think that there's a clear differentiation between spirituality and religiosity, and we want to cultivate both. So spirituality is more about the inner life, about the feeling, about the emotion. It's not necessarily connected to institutions, to organized religion, if we can use that expression, to even Judaism. So we want to do things and to engage in practices that can help us get in touch with God and to grapple with the idea of being holy, what that might mean, which a simple definition of holiness is simply doing good and being good, and just it's not anything that abstract, and to just be in touch with the world and to be in touch with ourselves and to reach out to God as love. On the other hand, then we also want to cultivate religiosity, which is more about organized religion, about Judaism, about synagogue practices, and here I'm in favor of a distinctly reform approach, but that, since it requires so much thinking and choosing, that requires more knowledge and more commitment maybe than conservative, not to compare to any other group, but it requires a little bit of effort. And so I would do things to try to cultivate both of these. Does that answer your question? Now, one of the areas that I'm experimenting, that we did in Jamaica very effectively, and is to try to deal with Judaic character development. So there's a group that's probably most of you that's interested in Jewish practice. So you like the Havdalah ceremony, and you like a little bit of the singing in Hebrew, and that sort of experience. But there's a much larger group, apparently, correct, that maybe members here, but they're not really interested in praying. They're not really interested in Judaic practices. They're not really interested in studying Torah. They're just not. And so I think that an approach that tries to help them get in touch with different character traits and connects that to Judaism, religion, but also spirituality, such as courage, perseverance, dedication, and that this could be something that could really affect everyone. And so the key point there, though, is that we need to be organized enough to figure out how we're going to reach almost everybody in the congregation, because it's easy. I can just get up there and do a sermon, and I'll reach the 35 to 45 semi-regulars, but the goal would be to try to reach everyone, and specifically people who don't come and may never come. But if they actually read an email, or if we knock on their door and spend 5 minutes when they come to the door in their pajamas, telling them about the importance of whatever character trait in Jewish tradition, that could be a tremendous success. And just to follow that up, is in my current congregation, the president and I, and the president of my congregation there, he knows, he met a couple of your congregants, and in Birmingham they had what was it,
It was a seminar, but for the life of me, I couldn't give you the name of it.
Michael may remember.
No, I don't. I was
Yeah, right.
It was good.
You met Michael Pereira as well from
I met him, but I don't.
right here. Okay. So anyway, we spend almost every Wednesday we go around and we visit congregants. And so we'll make appointments, but he also likes to drop in on people. And so I thought of this concept with terrible trepidation. Drop in on people, oh no. I've been thinking your worst case scenario. Oh boy, there's a lot of giggles from that one. But so far it seems to have worked out pretty well. Nobody's thrown us out of their offices or anything like that. And it hasn't produced any catastrophic occurrences as of yet. Yes. And then you're next.
Brad Levis. Again, welcome to Huntsville.
Thank
To
you.
follow up on Fern's question, what's been your experience with the kids that are now in high school? That there's 3 or 4 of us sitting here in this sanctuary that were proud members of a youth group. They used to have 30 kids in it. We used to host conclaves. We used to do all those things that were really important for SEPTI or NIFTY now. And we really have lost that aspect of our kids. Now, we don't have big numbers, but we probably have 10 or 12 kids that fall into that category. So what's been your experience with those kids?
Very difficult, but there are certain things that clearly work. So the first and most important thing is camp. So much more than anything we do in this temple, if they go to Camp Jacobs, Camp Coleman, preferably URJ camp, because even though I don't work for the URJ, I'm sort of a party loyalist by default, or Camp Barney or whatever Jewish camp, that makes a huge difference. In Georgia, there was a family with 2 sons, and one went to Camp Coleman, one didn't, and the results were very, very dramatic. Same parents, same temple, same religious school, but the one that went to Camp Coleman for 6-7 years was a lifelong, devoted, dedicated Reformed Jew. The one that didn't had no interest whatsoever. So it made a huge difference. So that's one thing. Second thing, in Mobile, we've been lucky that pretty much everybody on the Mobile side has to send their kids to private school. So these private schools have a volunteer organization requirement. So they have to, especially in their junior and senior year, volunteer for a volunteer organization. Of course, if they have to volunteer, they're not really volunteering, are they? But we won't point that out because it works to our favor. So all of the kids are very keen to work for us, right? Because I guess the alternative, I don't know what the alternatives are, but clearly we are a very attractive option. So Sunday morning we have the post-confirmants who are now coming in and working as teachers' aides. And we've been able to do a couple of youth group style programming working off this volunteer business. So we went down to Dolphin Island a few months ago, and there was a library that needed to be moved across the street. And so the kids got volunteer hour credit for moving books from one building to another. And and then there was lunch. They went swimming. They had a great time. We got several kids that don't. We had several kids that do come, and then a number of kids that don't come. But this brought them out. We had one or two social events with bowling and pizza and stuff. But it's very hard to maintain the youth group structure in very small communities. So I don't have any magic solution for that. But with the camps and with some occasional activities, and if you can get them to continue to volunteer or even to work for pay in the religious school, that can keep them in touch. So does that answer your question? I'm trying to be realistic and as honest as possible. Now, of course, if you have something where you can, that you can have a subsidized trip to Jewish New York for 4 days or something like that, or you can offer scholarship to do Torah study. So any junior or senior high school who wants to come on Wednesday night to Torah study pretty much every week for the year would get the Bernstein Fellowship, and they'd get $2,000 toward college, plus they'd get something to put on their resume for applications. That might work in certain cases. Yes?
How important is music to your services? Unfortunately, our choir director was unable to be here tonight, but we do have a choir, and how involved are you with music for the services, and how important is it to you for the experience?
Music's very important. I've been told that I sing. Sometimes I sing better than a sick frog. Sometimes not. But in Mobile, there's a professional choir, a quartet. These are non-Jews who are paid. But they're not paid that much, and they're very dedicated. And so they sometimes sing. And then we have a volunteer choir called our congregation choir with about a dozen congregants. And what's interesting there is because of connections with the music community, they sometimes draw in outsiders who just come occasionally to help sing. So we want a lot of vibrant music, and that's really, really important. And I think you have to invest time and money into it because it's a very worthwhile investment. So we have a brand new choir director, and I interact with him quite extensively. I generally let him make his decisions, so I don't order him around, but we consult back and forth extensively. And there's, of course, questions of how much of the music should be participatory and how much should be performance, and how do you signal the difference. So it's very important that people like when we want you to sing, we want you, somebody needs to stand there and go, let's go guys, sing. And then when you're performing, the choir or whoever needs to step back and puff out their chests, and we're ready for the opera. And so that people understand the difference, so they're not sitting there thinking, do we sing, do we not sing? So when we want you to sing, we want everybody to sing, and that's really the most important thing for musical participation. But there's also opportunities for just listening to the operatic voice, and this one we're going to ask you to sit out, just listen. So, but the participatory singing is vital and absolutely very important.
Scott,
we're being stopped after this our last question.
That will be last. But anyway, can you describe specifically how you as a rabbi and the aspects of how you counsel congregants that are ill and their families?
Well, part of my job is to counsel. Now, I'm not a licensed psychologist, so I make this clear to them right away. I'll give you, it's hard to answer the question in abstract, so I'll give you 2 quick examples. So, in the last 3, 4, 5 weeks, a woman came, I can think of 2 people that came to me. One was a woman whose mother had died, She had a sister who's a lawyer in St. Louis, and the sister was the official arbiter of the estate, and there was terrible problems. So we met once a week for several weeks, and I tried to counsel her on two levels. On a practical level, as we got into it, I realized that her sister's a lawyer, her sister's running the estate, her sister, for unknown reasons, is not being cooperative. This woman needs a lawyer. And she wanted to save money by not hiring a lawyer, but I said, but you're not getting anywhere. The estate's been ongoing for a long time, and you're getting very, very frustrated, and your husband is getting very angry, so I think you're going to have to bite the bullet and hire a lawyer who can, talk to your sister as lawyer to lawyer, and if necessary, send official letters to clarify what's going on, because that's unfortunately going to be necessary. That was one level. On the other level, we just talked about her feelings about losing her mother, but also kind of losing her sister. And so it was very sad, and there may not be anything she can do to maintain that relationship with her sister. I never met her sister, I don't know, but it didn't sound good. And so I can't make the situation better, but I tried to help her to bring out a feeling. The other case was a woman who has addiction issues, and she'd been in alcohol drug rehab, and she was doing pretty well with that, but her tendency toward addiction was sort of creeping into other areas that weren't as necessarily as serious, but nevertheless showed a certain problematic pattern of behavior. And so I emphasized to the woman I thought she needed a psychologist to see every week, and that she needed to understand that the addiction was not just manifested in excessive drug and alcohol use, but she would grab onto anything, Netflix or anything, and it could, and her behavior could be addictive there too, and that wasn't good as well. She was neglecting work, and so it may not be as catastrophic as heroin overdose, but it wasn't good either, and she needed to get a handle on it before things got out of control. So those are just two examples where.
Follow-up. Give one example of where you visit a colleague at the hospital.
Oh, okay. Well, I do that all the time. Of course, I'm reliant on the caring committee letting me know that they're in the hospital. We have a secretary that calls hospitals a couple times a week, so we don't always hear about things. There was one person who was in the hospital 3 weeks, and then I heard he was in the hospital, so I visited him, thinking he arrived there yesterday, and he said, "I've been here 3 weeks, and you haven't visited me." So, so I did my best to apologize, and but when I hear about people in the hospital, or if they're at home and they want to visit, I visit them. I'm also careful. You all know the Mishabera, and if Fred goes with me, we would sing it. If I'm without Fred, I'd probably just recite it. But you have to be careful there, because once in Georgia, I visited a guy who was not very regular at Temple, and he had an oxygen mask on. He was in pretty bad shape, but he wasn't dying, and I knew that. But I went over to Dul Mishabera, and I didn't ask him or anything, because he was all hooked up. So I started Mishabera, I just get 3 or 4 words out, and he starts waving frantically. He thinks I'm giving him the Jewish last rites. Trying to tell me, I'm not dying now. And so now I'm a little more careful. I make sure to ask first.
What are you looking for in a congregation and in a community?
Friendly, committed, open, transparent, excited. I mean, cooperative. Larry will add several more that I'm too polite to say. Cooperative.
Let's eat.
We're Jews, let's eat.
I'm going to be at the Wine and Cheese, so you feel free to come over and say hello. And if you want to drill me privately on questions that were too delicate to ask in public, feel free. Thank you very much. And Shavua Tov.